Okay. So Jessie, thank you so much for joining us as part of the Bright Light series. The series is created just to share a little bit of bright light in this time of uncertainty and a little bit of chaos. And the idea is to share exercises and activities that can help us navigate this time, but also throughout the time that we're running our businesses, whether there's a global pandemic or not. There are exercises and things to think about that can help us all the time. So I met Jessie a year ago, I guess, maybe a little bit longer, and over the internet, and then became friends and met in real life. And there's a really funny story you can hear about when her podcast episode comes live, and I'll leave that for there. But we share a lot of things in common. We really love being outside and supporting women and exploring lots of things lots of things in the world, lots of things in business, lots of things that are especially connected to women and how women are adventuring and living in the world. So Jessie, can you give folks a little bit of an introduction about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Tara. This is exciting. So I'm a coach and women's mentor, and I'm also a doula. I've spent, which is probably one of the first things that we realized we had in common, Tara. So I've been doing that work in the birth world for 12 years or so. And about 5 years ago, I made a small pivot in my business so that I am still working with women, with birthing women, as a doula and mentor and running retreats and online programs. But I also work with women who are making all kinds of change in their lives. And I kind of categorize that change as being radical transformation or rites of passage. And I talk about radical transformation as being the root of the word radical is root. And so the idea that the transformations that I'm sort of most interested in supporting women through are the ones that kind of bring us back to our roots. And so kind of bringing all that wisdom from working with mothers and into what it takes generally to make change in our lives, especially change to who we are as opposed to the things that we do or the circumstances of our lives. So that's a little bit about my work. And I'm a mom of 2 kids, and I live on the Eastern Shore. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything. Oh, I'm an author. I wrote a book last year called Project Body Love. And I have another book coming out soon-ish. I don't know. Sometime soon. Yeah.
That one is about?
That one is called Mother Shift. Motherhood is a rite of passage. So that's kind of taking all of the wisdom of 12 years of birth practice and putting it into a book and talking about the identity shift of motherhood. So,
yeah. I can't wait to read that book. And you have a podcast as well called Becoming, which it was really nice to be invited to chat with you on that podcast. And I'd highly recommend that to folks to tune in to listen to those episodes as well.
Yeah, thank you. You're up after, I've got Estelle Thompson coming up in next week or so, and then you're up after her. And yes, I'm very excited. It's a brand new baby podcast, but it's already really fun.
Yeah. So when I thought about bringing people together who could be a bit of a bright light in a somewhat dark time, I mean, Jessie came to mind right away. One, because you've got so much experience and wisdom sort of to share around transformation and change and how we do that. And oftentimes the change that you're helping people kind of navigate can be pretty big, pretty large change, right? So I knew that I wanted to talk to you because of that. And also you can sort of have those conversations in a quite serious way and hold space in that way, but you can also like see the reality and the humor and bring the realness to that as well. And you're not afraid to talk about what it's like to navigate this stuff that's going on. So so I guess thinking about change and how we do it well, we talked a little bit before we hopped on here about letting go, and that we don't often think about that part of change is like thinking about what we're letting go of. How do we let go of things? And it's okay to let go of things in the process of change. So if you could sort of start us off with that?
Yeah. It's a part of, a lot of the sort of big changes that we experience, like rites of passage in our lives. We talk about what we're letting go of and what we're leaving behind. And I kind of, look at that as a grieving process. And I think that's something that a lot of people have been talking about, specifically with the time that we're in now and the things that we're grieving right now and letting go of. And I like to broaden the conversation around grief in a couple of ways. And one of them is to kind of look at the changes that we go through, or the things that have changed for us, through a lens of grief. So we often think of grief as being something that's associated with, like, a death, for example. And I like to kind of broaden that out and sort of question, is there something that needs grieving, or something that needs letting go about, perhaps a change that actually seems really good? So one of the first ways in which I dabbled in this was talking about grief around motherhood, and that very wanted motherhood with a happy and healthy mother can also come with a heavy dose of grief for the life you had before children. And then expanding that conversation out and thinking about all of the ways that we grieve change in our lives in general. And I kind of, in thinking about this and playing with this in my mind, I came up with this little phrase one day, that you can't do the growth without the grief. And I think that, what I often see with people who are trying to make change in their lives, or trying to kind of get through change that's happened to them, we do kind of focus on the outcome of it. Like, things are going to be better when, or I'm just going to push through this and get through to the other side, or I'm going to set 100 goals for myself and just doggedly go at them. And what I notice is that when we don't kind of take the time to let go of what's come before, even if that thing was terrible and you don't want it in your life anymore, that we often get stuck in the process of moving forward. And that's kind of often one of my first questions of people who are stuck in some way or another in their forward progress in their lives, and sort of stepping into what's next after major transformation. My first question is, have you attended to the grief and the what you're leaving behind? And so it's just kind of an interesting, again, I think of it as a lens that you can kind of put on and say, is it possible that I haven't completely sort of released who I was before this? An example of this that's sort of, again, kind of doesn't fit the mold of what we think of when we think of grief is I work with women, after writing Project Body Love, I work with women who are going through a radical transformation in the way they live in their bodies, and who are on a journey of body acceptance. And as much as you might think that deciding to accept your body is a nothing but good change, we have a conversation around grief, because when you think about, so accepting your body might look like a bunch of different behaviors, but what it also is that you are becoming a person who can love their body. Maybe you are becoming the kind of person who no longer talks terribly about themselves or about the way they look, for example. And what you're unbecoming a person who's a part of diet culture, for example. And so when you decide to opt out of a particular way of being or a particular identity, there's often a loss of belonging there. So I went through a grieving process when I decided to accept my body. I all of a sudden wasn't a part of, or wasn't interested in being a part of, but still wasn't a part of the communities of people who were talking about how many points their lunch was and what races they were signing up for this weekend, next weekend, and every weekend hereafter, right? So there was a process where I needed to kind of figure out where I belonged now and figure out who I was now. And I needed then to grieve the person I was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's so relatable and transferable to so many things like that are happening right now, but also even thinking about sort of, bigger picture entrepreneurship, right? Like thinking about grieving, even if you're working, we talk a lot about money mindset, and like that's a topic that comes up over and over again with conversations that I know I have with clients. I'm sure you do too, Jessie, like leaving behind that scarcity mindset when we think about money and what that looks like if you're consciously sort of letting go of that and moving into a more growth mindset around money specifically, even or around anything in your business, even letting go of mind shifts or mindsets and shifting that, like there's a lot of comfort in being in a mindset where a lot of people are stuck at, right? You're part of something. So to let go of that and to venture off to something that's new and sometimes can be really scary to deal with, I'm sure. I don't think we often think about grieving that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, we can look at things through a grief lens, we can look at things through an identity lens. So when you're talking about mindset, for example, I know you and I are both very social justice minded people. And so we think about, so if I increase my prices, then what does my work then, who does my work then become inaccessible to, for example? And so I'm quite identified as being someone who is sensitive to that. And so then stepping into a different kind of money mindset might take that identity and kind of go, oh, wait a second, this doesn't quite fit with the person I thought I was. And so there's kind of some tangling around to do in there. And again, this is sort of taking this kind of radical transformation or rites of passage approach always asks, who am I being now, or who am I now, rather than, what am I doing differently? You can raise your prices forever and a day, but if you don't kind of shift the identity to go along with that, that also might be, I hear this a lot around self-care, for example. Like I can have a bath in my calendar, but if I don't feel as though I'm worthy of it, then I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to change any of my behavior. So that is sort of a lens with which I approach change also is, who am I now that this is true?
Yeah, I think definitely when you talk about that identity, especially right now in the climate we're in right now, there's a lot of talk and a lot of thoughts and feelings around entrepreneurs continuing to sell, continuing to work, and there's such a polarizing conversation happening with that. And I think a lot of people are kind of getting stuck and not sure what to do. And we talked a little bit in the last conversation with Sally about trusting your gut, and I think a lot of that kind of like definitely layers in with this conversation as well, right? Like looking at how you can let go of that and grieve that and think about that and sort of identify the shifts that you're making right now. If you're making changes in your business or your life, like we're all of our lives, like the entire world is kind of shifting and changing right now, right? Like the entire planet is going through this transformational path right now. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to say about like how can we sort of step into the change. I guess the first step is acknowledging what you're changing and acknowledging what you're what's changing for you, what you're letting go, what's you're stepping into. Like how could somebody sort of step into that with confidence and feel really good about making any shifts that they're making right now?
Yeah. I'm a fan of a slow approach. So I kind of I have a 4-step approach, and I also have some kind of key supports that I try to sort of rally around my clients and people who are making big changes, and inner knowing is one of them. So that's kind of bang on, as you were saying, we're talking with Sally. And so the first step that I talk about, and I like to use sort of earth-based metaphors for a lot of this work, because that's very much a part of what I do. So I call it earth. It's like a process of just getting an orientation really of what's happening for you right now. And So I liken it to when, if you ever take a wilderness training, when you talk about getting lost in the woods, the first thing that they teach you is not to go crashing around through the woods trying to find the path you were on, but to sit down and look around and pay attention to what's around you. And so that's kind of how my best way of describing the first step. So again, like we kind of tend to, when we are exploring the idea of a pivot or a change or whatever is happening, so maybe something quite radical is happening, we tend to kind of want to get on with it and envision the change and create goals and structure around it and, charge on through. And that approach is really well supported in our capitalist society, where we're kind of told, like, get on with it. You're not being a good worker bee if you're sitting here in the middle of the forest trying to figure out what your next steps are, right? So we get a lot of feedback for moving forward, and we get it kind of often negative feedback, or the sort of like, are you done yet? Trying to figure out what your next steps are. So it can be challenging. It can be a challenging first step. And I really think it is the first step.
Our culture sort of praises that we talked about this before, that hustle culture, right? Like, you're doing such a good job if you're staying up late and getting up early and not stopping and not eating, and you're moving, driving everywhere and doing this, and your only focus is on that. And it can be so easy to get tied up in that. So yeah, we're inundated with that. We see, role models displaying that, and leaders, modeling that for us. And so I think that's really important to state. And it takes some time to feel confident in the ability to pause, right? And
I think
with people.
It's true. One thing that we've talked about before too, Tara, and I've played with this, and I think you have too, is the idea of like failing fast and pivoting. And I feel like that's actually, that kind of nimbleness is also something that's quite, well respected or rewarded in our kind of startup culture, I want to say. And again, yes, but you don't often hear about how are they evaluating the failure and pausing and maybe metabolizing that failure a little bit before moving forward. So yeah, I think that's another part of the kind of entrepreneurial culture that gets kind of big props, that like, failure is okay as long as you kind of fail fast and pivot, and make it look all kind of fun on Instagram. Yeah.
So true. It's so true. Yeah, we don't see it's like everything on social media. You see what's in that little box, and you're not seeing all the steps it took, or the really tough parts of it. Yeah. So sitting in the woods, hugging a tree, isn't that what they ask you to do in your laws, is to hug a tree so you don't move, right? I remember that.
Start a fire, make yourself comfortable.
Yeah.
Yes. And yes, make yourself comfortable here, because I the next step in the process for me, and I use water as a sort of analogy, is the grieving element of this, and releasing or letting go, whatever it is that you need to let go of. So it's something that I have just recently kind of made a pivot in my own business and rebranded. And although that probably looked like it took a hot minute on the internet, it was probably a full year of kind of going like, can I do this? What am I going to do? And I kind of took myself through the same process, and kind of, realizing that I needed to pivot. And for me, this particular pivot, I needed time to step into this new space, and I really needed to acknowledge what I was leaving behind, because there was a part of my identity that was really wrapped up in the way I was doing my work before, but it wasn't working for me. So yeah, I think, even when it comes to kind of pivoting the work that we're doing in our business, maybe you're discontinuing a product, for example, and there may be, feelings there around what that means, for example, or, discontinuing a particular service, and like, who are you if you're not offering that anymore? So there's, again, the opportunity to look through a grief lens when we're kind of making changes to our work. And then the next step, again, we're going to stay comfortable here because the element I use to talk about this is air. And what most people say in this stage is it's the liminal phase. It's the sort of in between of like, you're not that anymore, but you're not quite this yet. And we often say everything is up in the air. I don't know what's next, but I know that I'm not going back anymore. And again, this is like a dreadfully uncomfortable phase to be in. And again, if we bypass it, I find that we end up kind of trying to recreate the circumstances that we just came from. But because we're a changed person, or the context has changed, we're very poor at recreating those experiences or those circumstances. And so it tends to cause a lot of suffering. So air is about, to me, it is about literally getting comfortable and tending to yourself and kind of tending the fertile ground with which, that has all of the nutrients for the change that you're going to make. Getting really good at self-care, getting really good at ritual. And some of these things that we can, pull in. Inner knowing is something that comes up here, like cultivating that sense of trust, self-trust, and intuition, so that in fact when the time is right to take the next step or to take the first step in the new direction, you can have an inner knowing of that and feel like drawn towards that, as opposed to kind of panicking and trying to scrabble something together, trying to set new goals when you're just not ready yet. And then, so the final stage is fire. And that's the fun stuff. That's the part that everybody wants to kind of cut to. But even still, I never recommend sort of these broad sweeping goals. I take an approach that's based in complexity theory that basically says when we're looking at changing a complex system, broad sweeping changes don't actually work. So what I do is I encourage people to do tiny experiments. So little tiny ways to nudge at what might be true for you now, what might feel good now. And the other way of describing tiny experiments is safe to fail experiments. So, things that are sort of small and incremental enough that actually it's fine if it fails. And in fact, if it does fail, it's great because you get a little bit more information about where you're headed next. So if you're, for example, thinking about offering a new service, you can, try, beta test it with a few people. See how you feel. Like, did you enjoy doing that? Did you feel kind of embodied in that process? Did it feel good for you? Or, obviously there's a learning curve, so things might feel clunky, but you can kind of get a feel and then sort of take the next step. You can amplify anything that's working and dampen anything that's not working. It's sort of the terminology that we use around tiny experiments. So that's kind of like the process that I see change working best in, especially when it's sort of identity level change as opposed to sort of little behavioral changes. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I love steps and processes.
Yes.
I appreciate being broken down and using that metaphor. And I think like what I heard from that most clearly was it's okay to take it slow. Like, it's okay, and it's really how you're going to make the change. If you rush through it, you'll probably end up back at the start or some place you don't want to be. So just take it slow, try little steps, like step by step. And I feel like that's what I'm chatting with a lot of people about right now, is just like day by day, hour by hour, like take it step by step. There's no way you can plan so far in advance right now, or anytime you're in sort of that moment of change, right? That season of change, wherever you're at. And I think it's so, on one hand, it's so sad that we need permission to take it step by step, right? Like, so often people feel after, they have a conversation, we know this, and we talk to our friends or our partners or our family, and we talk something through, it's almost like you have that sense of relief that you have that conversation and that you get that, like, approval to take it slow because we're so bombarded with everything moving so fast. So thank you for, again, kind of giving us permission to do that and helping us figure out how we can do it. Yeah, I think now more than ever, where the world is sort of pausing, maybe that's shifting. I don't know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see if people take this time and kind of replicate that when we keep saying when the dust settles, but when things shift again, oh, maybe maybe people will take this, learn from this, and use this time and implement it later on too. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Do you want to, we talked about an exercise. Do you want to take us through that, or is there anything else that you wanted to share before that?
No, I mean, we could probably talk all day, but we why don't we do the little practice, and then if we have kind of a conversation or questions afterwards, then we'll have time for that.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is a practice that I do with all of my clients, and it actually came from my writing group that I am a part of, and we're a very tight-knit group of people, and every time we would meet, we would spend almost all of our time just checking in with each other. Like, so this is happening, and we finally created a writing prompt around it, which was take 5 minutes and write 5 sentences about what's happening right now for you. And the time constraint is purposeful because it's tricky. Usually when we're faced with that kind of constraint, and there's also sort of a length constraint, it's 5 sentences. Usually when we're faced with that kind of constraint, we very quickly boil things down to the essentials. And every time I do this, and every time I guide people through this, it seems to be kind of surprising what ends up being important enough to be one of the 5 things. So it's a kind of a nice way to tap into that subconscious a little bit. So it's 5 sentences in 5 minutes, or 5 minutes if you don't take the whole 5 minutes, that's okay. Hopefully I can share my screen. I have like 187 windows open here. I just have a couple of questions, and I'll bring them up if I can.
Should be the green button on the bottom.
Yeah, I know. I see. I remember we talked about this already. I'm trying to find my bloody thing, but it's actually not showing anything. Is that weird or what? I can always.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there's my desktop. Beautiful. Da, 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 da. Do you see things? Do you see the questions?
There we go. Maybe just scroll down a little bit, or maybe, is it 3 questions?
Is that good? Yep. What is true for you right now? What has changed? What is happening? So you don't have to answer these questions, but it's kind of like as you're writing, thinking, okay, what's true for me now? What has changed? What's happening? And you can make this about yourself, your business, both. If you were checking in with a friend and you had 5 sentences in 5 minutes, what is true for you right now? What has changed? And what is happening? Can we give you 5 minutes?
Yeah, we won't ask, unless people want to share it, you don't have to share. Just, I know that sometimes feels a little nervous making.
Yeah, it's perfect. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Amanda, we'll see you. Thanks so much
for being here. Take care. Awesome. Okay. So just about 1 more minute we'll take.
Gisela, do you have 5?
We're good?
We're good.
Oh, okay, perfect. 4 minutes, well done. Let me just stop my share. There we go. Cool. Awesome.
That was interesting. I feel like I was able to get 3 down right away, like immediately, and then the other 2 had to like think a little bit more on them. But really, and we chatted about this. You know, you mentioned the constraints. When you put in those constraints, you know, we often associate constraints with negative and bad and not helpful, but they can be so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I sort of immediately went to gratitude with mine, like thinking what I'm grateful for and that I'm healthy and safe, and those are the ones that came up right away, and then kind of made me really think like what has changed and what's happening right now, like to filter out like everything that's going on and really what really is happening right now for me and for my family and what's in my community.
Just thinking about that kind of emotional state and that mental state and acknowledging that they're in 2 different places right now, that like being in that tension is really hard, but acknowledging it is such a beautiful first step. Like I see that you have that awareness. I feel like that's going to serve you well.
I feel like that probably happens often, right? In this path, like never get to a place where they're both just like walking side by side. Everything's like tickety boo. Like I feel like, how do we get to that place, or are we always sort of kind of navigating that? Jessie, do you have any ideas around that, or
That kind of desire to move forward, and the tension between like being like the readiness, is that maybe I wonder if that's what it is. And I feel like, you know, when I say that it's wise, I do think that most of us kind of do get pulled into moving forward whether we're ready or not, you know. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and this might be helpful in this context, is about metabolism. And I think of change. I mean, when you think of metabolism, you're taking something in, and it might be nutritious or not, and your body is digesting it, and it's keeping what's good and getting rid of what's bad. Right? And then using what's good for, you know, your further flourishing. Fundamentally, that's all metabolism is. And so when you think about change as something you kind of take in, a lot of us kind of skip the whole digestion part and sort of end up, again, like we say, sort of just pushing forward without actually digesting the change. And so part of that sort of sitting in that liminal space for me is digesting change. And everyone has kind of different ways of doing that. One way that I've been finding really valuable has been to do morning pages. And I've been doing morning pages for a few months now. So 3 pages, kind of free written, no censoring, like don't take your pen off the page. And in the morning, I guess, if that works for you. And it originally comes from The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she talks about it as being sort of a creativity unblocker. But from my perspective, what it's been is an opportunity to just kind of do what we just did with the 5 sentences, but like big style every day for as long as you need it. And I kind of wrote myself a little ritual prescription for the medicine of morning pages, because I needed to metabolize. And I thought that would be the best way to do that. And other ways people metabolize would be, you know, anything where you're kind of getting lost in a moment, in flow, moving your body, being outside. And I think those are the things that hold us in this really uncomfortable liminal space long enough for the emotions to kind of feel like they're in a place to catch up to our minds, maybe. Yeah, so I don't know if that helps, but to me, it's sort of like it's kind of tending practices that we do in this liminal space that help to hold us here. Yeah.
It's almost like finding that safe space for you to feel that and know that that's okay to be in that. And if it's
Yeah.
writing, or if it's going for a walk, or if it's snuggling with puppy, who knows what it is, right? We need to kind of figure out what it is for us, but it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Something that I think that allows you to process it. You know, I'm going to take this metaphor one step too far and say that they're like little probiotics that kind of help us to digest what it is that we're experiencing. So something that moves the energy or moves the emotion through us, I think is kind of key. So writing, movement, maybe just being able to talk to someone, a counselor or a coach or someone like that, or a friend. I think those things are kind of key for something that moves that energy in a way that's like moves it up and out, not kind of spiraling the drain like sometimes we do when we're in a kind of ruminating state. So something that helps us to kind of move forward with our process, if it makes sense.
Yeah. It's not always easy, but I think if you can find
No.
that, I find it so hard to talk about these things, and it's like the classic easier said than done, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's worth to say that it's hard to get to that place, and it's hard to find that, especially when there's so many layers of things happening that like don't let not being able to get there add to your stress. Like try to fit it in when you can, or see it, kind of explore that when it feels light and you're able to explore. But yeah, not to, it seems like it would counter serve to feel stressed about finding your place to digest it when you're just trying to manage day to day, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And one of the kind of key skills that, we had talked about sort of those seven key pillars that of support that I think we need in radical transformation. One of them is ritual. And so I do a lot of teaching around like ritual design, ritual creation, and a daily ritual or sort of a regular ritual that kind of holds us in a place of being able to metabolize, even if it's just for 5 minutes, can be really, really powerful. And meaningful ritual creation is something that we've kind of lost the skill of. One of the ways that I like to describe it is as like building a nest for yourself. And so you don't underestimate the number of little twigs and ribbons and little bits that you need to kind of pull together so that you can take that 5 minutes and hold yourself in that container of processing, of connecting to your emotions or your body or whatever that metabolism process looks like. So creating really strong ritual practice. Again, for me right now, it's morning pages. I was just working with a client yesterday who's kind of trying to process a loss right now, and so she created this beautiful ritual that helps to honor the loss that she's experiencing, and it's just a little kind of practice each day. But I think it helps to kind of offer ourselves a little grounding in this time. So yeah, like not something that I don't feel like it should be a should, not necessarily like another thing on the to-do list, which is why I feel like that kind of process of deciding how to metabolize or how to care for yourself is the most important part, because it has to be the medicine you need right now, right? Not just like, oh, it really seems like I should journal about this. That's not gonna work, right?
That's not ever sustainable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So something that, and oftentimes I'll quite, really heavily rely on my intuition for sort of the practice that I need right now. So back in November, it was like, it came to me, I need to do morning pages. Like this is the prescription for me right now. It's starting to kind of feel like I don't need them as much anymore. And I know that there will be something, else that comes along and says like, oh, this is the thing I need right now.
That
Yeah.
is so great to hear, because I feel like so often when people talk about ritual, it's such a it's on such a pedestal, almost like you need to create
Mm.
a ritual and you need to do this for the next 40 years and you always have to do it at this place when the sun is coming up here. Like, I think what I know, maybe that's just me, when I hear people talk about ritual, it feels so sacred that you almost don't want to start it because you're afraid you're going to ruin it. Like, so to hear you say
Yeah.
that, like, figure out what works, and maybe it's changing it from ritual to routine for me, like language makes it more accessible, but
Mm.
so refreshing to hear you say that you could change your ritual. That's okay.
Yeah. Oh, we could jam on this a lot, but I
Yeah.
think it is different than routine. And I do think it needs to have, you're right. I think what you're talking about is like, I use the word precious to describe it. Like it's so um persnickety that it's like
Yeah.
you can't screw it up in any way. And
You feel bad,
but at the
but I'm
same
screwing this
time,
up and I'm trying to do this so I don't screw everything else up.
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, when I talk about making the nest, I liken it to I think you and I had talked about this, like when your kids have no structure in their lives at all, and they go kind of feral, and then they start to like behave in ways that are not normal for them. It's sort of in the same way as we need a really strong structure for something like emotional processing or metabolism or transformation to happen in. So when I say building the nest, it does sound like, yes, I'm making it precious in a way. But I think you need that strong structure to be able to hold your ritual.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, there's this kind of like fine balance between it being something that can be flexible, but if it's so flexible that you never do it, or that it looks different every time and loses its meaning, then that's not supportive. So
Yeah.
it's like a fine line. We could jam on this all day, but but that's sort of some initial thoughts about that.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think, yeah, giving it some time. And I think, I don't know, for me thinking about it seasonally, like naturally
Yeah,
how I function, like those rituals would probably change each season, maybe, or depending on the season of your life or the season of the year. Yeah, that was yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you for saying that.
of course.
So I think I'm just checking the time, and I think probably we'll wrap up now. And Jessie, I just want to say thanks again for sharing and for providing this insight and giving us permission to think about these things in different ways, and reminding us of the importance just to pause and just sit in things for a little bit, and not having to continually hustle and move fast and change. And it's okay just to slow down a little bit and think things
Yeah.
through, and to feel it. So thanks for that. Thanks for the exercise, um, and helping us process things in 5 sentences in 5 minutes is really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.